All right, thanks for joining. Hope you're doing well. I wanted to talk a little bit about building highly interactive, type-safe applications with Remix. The gold standard for this is arguably tRPC, create T3 stack style using Next.js and React Query, and a lot of awesome, nice stuff there. So let's take a few minutes and see if we can recreate that experience in Remix. Spoiler alert, we can. And we can actually do it in just a few hundred lines of really flexible, extensible boilerplate. And with no third-party packages other than Zod, obviously. And I'm using superjson, but you definitely don't have to. All right, so let's dive right in. So the goals here, as I just mentioned, we want to create like a minimum viable tRPC developer experience in Remix. And let's try to do it in just a few hundred lines of, I'll say few because it's closer to 300, a few hundred lines of helper code. Okay, so the steps to do this are install Zod and superjson. I've already done this. This is a completely fresh Remix project, except that I've installed Zod and superjson. Okay, and then delete the template demo code. Okay, so what I mean by that is just inside of this roots folder, if you go to your index.tsx, I've just deleted everything that's in there. So we're literally just returning a fragment here, returning nothing. Okay, just so we have a fresh place to start. Then I added a globals.css file and I imported it in root.tsx. Okay, so here's my CSS. It's not important for what we're talking about. In reality, I'd probably use Tailwind or whatever, but this is what we're going to do today to keep it simple. And then the way I imported that in the root is by this line right here, import styles from globals.css. Then I also imported this links function type from Remix.run/node. And we've got this line right here to get those styles applied. It's as simple as that. Other than that, we're not going to need to look at our styles or our root.tsx again. Cool. So now let's take a look at the boilerplate. I'm going to share this code later. I'm not going to go through it line by line here, but I just want to show you generally what we're doing to get this set up and how easy it really is. Let's see, let's start with our general utils file here. And I've got it in a folder called boilerplate. I wouldn't really do that in the real world, but I just wanted to be clear about which pieces of this we can just tuck away and not really worry about in day-to-day usage. So first of all, I've got this object to form data helper. I like using snake case like this. If you don't, sorry, I'm sure it's making some people cringe, but whatever, it's what I like. So object to form data helper, pretty self-explanatory. We've got an object from CTX helper, which takes the data function args type context from like your Remix loader or your Remix action. And, it's reading the form data that's submitted to it and returning it back to you in a nice consumable object. We've got a little handle API error helper here. It's pretty self-explanatory, but this is just the way I've set this up. You can do it however you want. Same thing with handle API success. And you can imagine customizing to be, better about the exact statuses and whatever, the status codes and whatever. And I've got a little mutation state helper here that takes in a fetcher, a Remix fetcher. And it has a data type of API res, which is essentially the return type from either of these functions. And we're just pulling some state out of that fetcher the way you would read from like React Query, for example. So I've got, in this example, we're focusing on mutations, but you can do all of this for queries and whatever. I think doing a mutation is the best way to show how to have like a highly interactive Remix app. Cool. So we've got like is mutating is going to be similar to is loading in React Query, is success, and is error. Okay, it's very simple. Then we get to kind of the more server-side tRPC style setup stuff. And it's very, very simple here. Again, can be extended however you want. But we've got this setup action helper where we take in, again, the remix data function context. This is totally optional, but just to show kind of how you'd really use this, I have a required role argument, which your required role, just made this up, but it can be any, I want to let any user in, a non, I want to bump you if you're logged in. For example, maybe a login page, you'd require them to be a non. User, this is going to be like a tRPC protected procedure. And admin, if you had like a tRPC admin procedure or something. Any would be like a tRPC public procedure. So anyway, you can pass in your required role, the data function context, and you can imagine here, doing whatever you want. You can check a JWT, you can check a session in the database, you can do whatever. Here I'm just making a fake user with a name of Bill. In reality, we're going to do like await get user, blah, blah, blah. And this is just one check for if your required role is user, say, and we don't have a user, let's just panic. So that's the kind of thing that you'll do here. You can extend this however you want. And then importantly here, we're also taking in an input schema. This is a Zod schema, and this is very similar to tRPC, how you do like, protected procedure dot input, then you toss in a schema, and then you do dot mutation and you toss in your function. This is what we're setting up here. So this is the input schema. And we're passing back, the context, so you have it. The user, if you want. Again, this can all just be deleted if you don't need it, but this is probably how you're going to do things. And then the actual input that you're getting from your user. Now, we're parsing this via Zod inline here. So this means that when you consume this input data, just like with tRPC, you have clean data. And if not, it's going to blow up. And that's, if you remember, what these like handle API error and handle API success helpers were for. Cool. So then we've got this mutation action. Again, we're focusing on mutations. This can be extended to be more generic, but this is just what we're going to do here. So we're going to try running this setup action and see if it blows up from, not being authorized or the input failing the parsing or what have you. And if that works, we're basically going to run the mutation function that's passed into here, which you'll see how that works in a minute, but this is basically like the function that you would put inside of your tRPC router, like get user dot input dot mutation, define a function. That's what this mutation function is. And if it blows up, then we'll return the handle API error. And then we've got some types here. It's nothing crazy, but this is just some of the, generic TypeScript stuff that makes this happen. All right. And then we've got our hooks. And this is basically just like recreating a very simple version of React query based on top of Remix is useFetcher hook. And interfacing with the other utilities that I showed you. Okay, so we've got this useMutate function that you can export from an action or from a root. I'll show you in a minute. And basically, you can pass in an on success callback, on error callback, on settled callback, just like React query. You're also passing in an input schema. And yeah, it's just doing some fun stuff here to make all of this work. You can look at this code yourself later. One fun thing we're doing here is we're also returning back like a handier version of the Zod error if there is a validation error. So that's what this is doing here, and some of this logic. Okay, so I'll show you what that means in practice here. So let's tuck away the boilerplate and get started in how you would build one of these API routes and consume it. Okay, so we're now here, or yeah, here. So let's create a folder in our routes called API. So this is going to be kind of like your tRPC router folder. And I'm going to do a file inside there called create.tsx. Okay. And we are basically going to start using this boilerplate code to build out, one of our, in tRPC language procedures. So let's start by importing the data function args type from Remix.run/node. We're going to need that. We're also going to need Zod. We're going to need that useMutate hook that I showed you a minute ago. And we're going to want the mutation action function. Okay, so that's what we're going to want. So the first pattern here is defining an action path. This is just going to be one line of code. I'm calling it action_path equals, and here, Copilot knew it. It's going to be /API/create. All right. Then let's, just like you would do with tRPC, let's define a Zod schema. So I'm going to say const input schema equals z.object. And let's say ID z.string. Let's say name z.string. And let's say age z.number. Okay, is that all making sense so far? And then let's say, so here we're going to export an action just like you would from any Remix API route. This is kind of similar to the full stack components concept that Kent talks about. Okay, so export const action equals async. We're going to say ctx data function args like this. All right, and then we're going to return this mutation action higher order function that we looked at before. So this takes an object argument. The first object is just ctx that we can pass it. Second argument is the input schema that we defined up here. Helps bring us the type safety across the app. Let's say required role user, because we set up that fake user. So, but in reality, whenever you define this kind of forces you to think about, should this be, anonymous, available to everybody, admin only, whatever. So I like to make this required in this kind of helper. And then we're going to define a mutation function here, which again is kind of like what you do inside of like the dot mutation portion when you're defining your tRPC routes. So we'll say async to an anonymous asynchronous function here. Now, here's the cool thing. Just like tRPC, we get access to those things that we set up in the boilerplate inside of here. So if I try to pull out of this, you can see we have access to the CTX. We don't need it because we have it here anyway. Input and the user. So let's just pull out input and the user here. And just to kind of show that we are in fact getting that, let's console log out input and user like this. Okay, we'll take a look at that later. And then here's where you can go do whatever you want. Let's just do kind of like a fake database call. Yep, that looks good. And then let's do the success case most of the time, and then like once in a while do an error case. Let's do .3. Yeah, that's fine. We can say if res equals error, throw new error. All right. Whoops. We said failure up here. We want it to be error. All right. Then let's just return the response. Okay, this doesn't really matter here. You're going to do whatever you want, but this will just help make things work. All right, so that's our action. We're exporting that from a file inside of the roots folder. So this is like all the Remix stuff, it's going to work here. And then let's set up the hook that we can use to consume this on the client side the way you would, React query style with tRPC. So let's say export const. I'm going to call this useCreateThing. So I'm not like focusing on any particular kind of record. This is kind of just showing how this works. All right, so we're going to return useMutate. And similar to the above, it takes a few arguments. One of the arguments is the action itself, which we're defining here. So that's what that is. This helps bring us the type safety. Another one is the action path. So this hook knows where to call. That's the point of this. The input schema that we have defined right here. And this is optional, but let's do an on success, like React query style, just to show that that's working. Cool, there's an on success. Let's do on error too. Thank you, Copilot. All right. All right, so we've got 38 lines of code here. That's not too bad. And let's consume this. So let's go into our index root and start putting some stuff in here. Let's see. We are going to want to call the useCreate thing. So we'll say const equals useCreate. There we go. All right. So just like useQuery, we get mutate back. I like to rename it. So let's say mutate is create thing. We're also going to get back a Zod error. We're going to get back an is mutating state, an is error state, and an is success state. Okay. Cool. So let's just make a big button here. And give it an on-click. And in this on-click, it'll be create thing. We'll say ID 123, name John, age 30. Okay. And let's have the button title label be dynamic. Yeah. Copilot knows. All right, so we've got our button there. Cool. Now let's do something based on the is mutating state and showing the Zod error. Okay, just to speed this up, I'm just going to copy this in from another file here. Cool. So we've got a button here. We're calling this with the specific data. It's all type safe. So if I try to do 123 as a number here, we're going to get an error. Number is not assignable to type string. Similarly, if I make age a string, we're going to get an error here because it's expecting a number. Okay, so this is just like using tRPC, which is great. Then we're reading the is mutating state, which is just like is loading on a React query use mutation. And based on the status, we're just doing kaboom or success from there. And if there is a parsing error from Zod, we're going to print that out down here, just in a pre-tag JSON stringify it. Okay. Yeah, so here's our app. We've got this button create thing. which is right here. And when we click it, it's going to run this callback, which is coming from this hook, which is defined here, which because of this action path knows to call this action. And that's all type safe end to end because of the input schema we've defined right here and passed into these. Okay. So this is what gives us that tRPC style developer experience here. So let's just see if we get lucky. So we got unlucky. We got an error. I think it was if math.random is less than 3, throw an error. So that's what happened here. We got the kaboom, and we got the on error callback ran here. If you recall, we console.logged error as our on error callback. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so this time we got success. This message, again, is coming from here. And this console log is coming from the onSuccess callback that we defined for our custom hook. Okay, so that's really all there is to it. I want to show you how cool passing back this Zod error is, though. So let's intentionally pass in a number for ID. Okay, so we're going to ignore the errors that VS Code is giving us and click the button anyway. We got the kaboom, but we also got, like without this even calling the server, just right away, it gives us this Zod error, so that can let you do like some really nice client-side validation. Cool. So I hope this has been insightful and show you how you can use these building blocks, just like a tRPC Next app, to build a highly interactive Remix app. You know, in most cases, you can just do kind of like the normal loader and action pattern. But the fundamental thing underneath this that powers this is useFetcher, which lets you do all the exact same tRPC style things, fully type safe, fully interactive, great developer experience. I love tRPC, by the way. I use it at work. I convinced my dev team to switch over to it. Everybody else is loving it, so this is not a dig on tRPC. It's just showing how you can do something similar in Remix. So, all right, hope this has been informative and enjoyable, and have a good one.